Okay, so Bungie's marathon is getting a little bit weird. Now, those of you who have been with the channel since the very beginning may remember the first ever video that I made was on Marathon, Bungie's next big game, where I talked about the game as a whole, as well as my questions and concerns. Fast forward 6 months, and things are now different, to say the least. But before we get into all of that though, here's a super quick recap for anyone who may not have kept up to date with Bungie's future reboot. The revival of Bungie's Marathon series was first announced back in May 2023, with a short but oh so pretty teaser trailer. The game was described by Bungie as a sci-fi PvP extraction shooter, which got a lot of people, including myself, talking. Since May of last year, we've heard very little and seen even less of Bungie's future cash cow, until recently. An article published by IGN, which I will link in the video description below, has revealed some unexpected changes in the game's direction. Titled, Bungie replaces Marathon director amid leadership shakeup, fears of layoffs. IGN reporter Rebecca Valentine writes, amid ongoing anxiety within Bungie following layoffs last year, the studio is now preparing for another shakeup, this time on Marathon, its upcoming service game intended as its next step beyond Destiny. According to multiple sources who are familiar with the matter, Bungie is in the midst of shifting around its creative leadership on Marathon, including removing longtime Bungie director Christopher Barrett from the game's director role. IGN had learned that Christopher Barrett was being replaced by former Valorant game director Joe Ziegler, who left Riot Games for Bungie in 2022. IGN stated that they had reached out to Bungie for comment on whether or not Barrett will remain with the company. Rebecca wrote, Bungie has not yet responded to IGN's request for comment, but shortly after we reached out, Ziegler confirmed his appointment as game director on X, Twitter. For the last 9 months, I've been working on Marathon as the game director, he wrote. We're still baking, but I'm excited to share with you more information on the game as we get closer and closer to bringing it to all of you. Now, while this is going on, sources tell IGN that Bungie is pouring resources into getting Marathon out of the door. The game's direction has shifted somewhat under Ziegler's new leadership, one source says, including moving away from custom player characters in favour of selectable custom heroes. And really, this brings us on to the overarching point of this video, the drastic change in direction with Marathon. Now, this whole situation does feel very Bungie to me, and I would love to know what specifically motivated the studio to remove Christopher Barrett from the role of game director. Maybe the studio was not satisfied with the direction that the game was heading in and decided that more of a change in lanes was needed. Or maybe the change was due to development issues or a lack of time and progress. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Some people will definitely be disappointed with the news, while others will likely be pleased with the change. But no matter which side of the fence you are currently hanging out on, we can all probably agree that if the game is going to be a hero shooter, then Valorant's former game director, paired with Bungie's outstanding dev team, should be able to produce something special. The ingredients are all there, but as we have all come to learn over the years, nothing is certain in this industry. The article also touches on Bungie's previous as well as ongoing financial troubles, layoffs and pressures from Sony. Now, the article notes that in October, Bungie laid off roughly 100 of its then 1,200 employees amid greater cost-cutting measures that saw Marathon delayed to 2025 and employee benefits slashed, further damaging the mood internally. Notably, multiple sources at the time and since have shared that Sony has largely left the studio to sort out its own troubles and was not responsible for layoffs, with the CEO of Bungie, Pete Parsons, taking responsibility. However, sources at the time also told IGN that when the leaders were asked if they would consider taking pay cuts prior to making the layoff decision, one responded that Bungie was, quote, not that type of company. Internally, the sentiment is only growing that the final shape needs to succeed for Bungie to avoid further internal turmoil. Neither Bungie nor Sony responded to IGN's request for comment. Something that is particularly interesting about this IGN article is, according to Paul Tassi over at Forbes, Ziegler stated that he's been game director for 9 months. However, this was never announced until the IGN article appears to have forcibly revealed it. Now, Paul Tassi also stated there has been no reason given for the change, and that Barrett is now simply listed as Executive Creative Director at Bungie, with unclear responsibilities. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns. Of course, the biggest, most glaring issue with all of this is that Bungie was always going to have their work cut out for them trying to convert a large section of the Destiny player base to an extraction shooter anyway. and removing customization in favour of selectable heroes is just going to make that task a hell of a lot harder. For the majority, Destiny's true endgame is fashion and min-maxing stats. These are the things that players pour their time into after acquiring everything that's available to chase. Now I know that I've personally spent way too much time in the Transmog menu and on D2 Armor Picker, tweaking stats and aesthetics. Without the ability to really customize and create individual characters, the game really is going to have to be absolutely top tier in order for it to survive long term. It's definitely a gamble on Bungie's part. The change in genre will potentially bring new players in, who lean more towards the extraction shooter, hero shooter type of game. But Bungie really needs to try and encourage as many of their loyal Destiny players to join in as possible. Destiny is a highly successful franchise and has dominated the looter shooter space now for a decade. But even then, being on top, Bungie is still falling short of targets set by Sony, however overinflated they may be. So how could the studio ever hope to reach these expected highs long term without the player base that has supported the studio for so long? And the fear of course being that Sony will no longer continue to support a studio that is repeatedly unable to reach its expected targets. Right now, we really don't know what Marathon will end up looking like. Bungie could very well be cooking up some kind of extraction-based hero shooter that carries over certain gameplay elements from Destiny, and sprinkles in the nostalgic aesthetics of a sideline franchise. If this proves to be the case, it will give the game a unique flavour and do the necessary job of separating Marathon from its competition. Now we know that the game will be pretty to look at, it will sound great, and it will likely have very satisfying feeling gameplay, simply because it's a Bungie game, and these are the three boxes that they always check. Marathon will need more than this though, if it is going to thrive and become Bungie's next big title. Thank you all very much for watching. How do you feel about the change in direction? As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the content and you want to support the channel, you can do so by clicking that like button, by sharing the video, and by subscribing to the channel. Good night, sub, and peace.